Hi, I'm Kim Tasso. There's scientific evidence to suggest it's not so much what you say, but how you say it. So today we're going to be taking a quick look at nonverbal communication, or NVC. It's like a secret language because it can help you gain some insight into what the person you're speaking to is really feeling, and perhaps even pick up some incongruence where there's a difference between what they say and how they say it. And also with good nonverbal communication, you can convey your personality and your enthusiasm and also your messages much more effectively. So in today's short video, a few ideas around nonverbal communication. I'll attempt to do some acting for you. Some people call it body language, but actually it's much more than just movement and gestures, as you will see. There are some suggestions in NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, that we should attempt to mirror and match the body language or nonverbal communication of people we're with, whether that's through the movements or our breathing, because that's what we do naturally when we're in rapport with people, or we're on the same wavelength. Okay, so we're having a lot of trouble at the moment in virtual meetings through the screen, and that's because we are cut off from an awful lot of nonverbal communication, which we rely on a lot for social cues. So we can't read it so well, and it's really hard to pick up micro expressions through a screen. Anyway, let's carry on. Right, why is nonverbal communication so important? Well, there's an old and probably well-known piece of research that said only 7% of the meaning when you communicate is through the actual words. 38% is through your voice, and a massive 55% is through what's going on with your gestures and your body language. I call that the kind of dance, the movement, and the music being more important than the lyrics. So that's just my way of thinking about things. Of course, you have to be careful how you interpret nonverbal communication around you. So someone who's sitting like this, you might interpret as being resistant and uncomfortable, but of course it could just be that they're really, really cold. Similarly, there's huge cultural differences. So in many cultures, a nod would mean agreement, but in some cultures it would be a sideways nod. So you have to be aware of gesture clusters and also the cultural and other environmental factors around it. Okay, so there are 9 types of nonverbal communication, so let's have a few of them. First of all is facial expression, and I think we could all agree here that this is definitely an angry impression. Okay, the second thing is around gestures. I have some props here to help me today. And again, I think we would all recognise these hand gestures as being things are okay. They're almost universal in terms of being good. Sometimes this has a weird meaning in some cultures. We also have to think about paralinguistics, where we're not actually using words, but we're going ooh, ah, and those sorts of noises. That's paralinguistics. Then there's body language, such as how we do our body posture and our movements. And then we have proxemics, which is how much body space we take up. Then, really important, eye contact. So that's really critical in nonverbal communication. And then we have haptics, which is actual touch. And I'm really sad that with COVID, we no longer have the only type of physical contact or touch which was allowed in a business environment, which of course was the handshake. Again, very Western culture, because we have bows and kissing in other cultures to say greetings. And the other 2 areas are appearance, and you'll notice today that I'm a bit different to how I normally appear, but that was just to see if you were watching the other videos. And also artifacts, things people use or keep around them. Okay, so there are 5 purposes of nonverbal communication. It could be to repetition, or contradiction, or substitution, or complementing, or accenting whatever is actually being said. The most recent research into non-verbal communication, which he calls honest signals, is by Alexander Pentland at MIT in the United States. And his research proves that people are dramatically affected by non-verbal signals. He actually shows that there is activity in our mirror neuron system, and that's activated when people mimic gestures from us. So that goes back to that point about mirroring matching from NLP. He also found that consistency in tone and motion indicates who knows what they're talking about. So people will infer an expert by their consistency. And when pitching, you can actually estimate the ratings just by looking at the person pitching's nonverbal communication. And with leadership, you can assess their effectiveness and predict their success by looking at nonverbal communication. So really powerful stuff. So let's spend a little bit of time thinking about the voice, as I said, about the music in nonverbal communication. The volume that you speak at really conveys confidence. So if I speak really loudly, you'll think I'm quite confident, whereas if I speak quite softly, you'll think that I'm not so confident because you can't hear me. Anyway, so that's one. The other thing is pace. So if I talk really quickly, you might think I'm a bit nervous or a bit anxiety or anxious, whereas if I talk too slowly, you'll get bored. Okay. Pauses can add dramatic effect, or they can also allow the other person to think and reflect and maybe respond. And we really react differently to different accents and our perceptions of what those different accents mean to us. Pitch is also incredibly important. It's suggested that people with a deeper voice come across as more authoritative than those with a high-pitched voice. And it's suggested that Margaret Thatcher did voice coaching to bring her voice down to a very deep level. Anyway, so just some thoughts on voice, projection, pitch, pace, pauses, passion, perception, personality, and personal commitment. Okay, so sitting down at meetings, let's switch from what we hear to what we see. One of the most important aspects, as we already mentioned, of nonverbal communication is eye contact. So you need to look directly at people. That's really difficult in our digital worlds because often the screen is in a different place to where the camera is, so that causes all sorts of issues. And if we're talking to lots of people in a room or in a conference room, we tend to lighthouse around so that we maintain eye contact with lots of people in the room, or so it appears. So I've got a lighthouse here to remind you of that one, to maintain eye contact with lots of people, particularly important when you're doing presentations and pitches. And of course, when we are talking to people in face-to-face environments, we use eye contact as like the baton or the social cue to pass over permission to talk. So if somebody starts looking at you, it's like they expect you to start speaking. Now, an eyebrow raise in extreme is a sign of surprise. A gentler version is a sign of recognition, and people who are networkers will be familiar with the eyebrow raise when they're moving around a room. A smile in most cultures is welcoming and it's friendly, and in most situations, if you smile, people will smile back. A lot of nonverbal communication, say, is mirrored and matched by people around you. Now let's think about space. We talked about proxemics. If you're scrunched up and taking a small amount of space, it doesn't convey a very confident impression. Whereas if you take a lot of space, it's kind of suggesting that you're confident and you're quite territorial and taking up, you know, a lot of space around you. And in my video on confidence, I talked about Amy Cuddy's amazing research into power poses, a favourite of which, of course, was Wonder Woman. Look at all the space she's taking up with her hands on her hips. One of my favourites. Anyway, Wonder Woman. So, you know, in a meeting, do you prefer having a table or a desk in front of you? Be careful, because that can create a barrier to people. And, you know, are you being disinterested and bored and sitting right back? Are you so excited you're leaning forward and on the edge of your seat? Think about teenagers. Can you still see me? When they go into a slump, real disinterest. Is your posture open? You know, no barriers, nice and open, or is it closed? When people have their arms folded, it's doing a couple of things. One is it's creating a little barrier between the person and who else. And there's also something going on called auto contact. We're giving ourselves a little hug for reassurance. So try not to do that arm folding or leg crossing if you can. Be much more open. How much energy do you have with your gestures? Now, of course, some cultures are much more expressive with their gestures than other cultures. And I find it really hard, to be honest with you, in some Eastern cultures where they put a great value on stillness and a lack of facial expressions, because it feels like I can't really read what's really going on with the person. It's really hard, actually. In fact, in our culture, a lack of gestures and movement would be construed as someone being less than truthful. So it does all sorts of interesting things with triggering nervousness and apprehension and antitrust in our brains when there aren't any body language. So there are some things to avoid. Avoid touching your face, because that's generally associated with dishonesty. Although a headrest is okay, because we all know that means you're thinking, right? There's the thinker. So that's something I should think about avoiding. Also, any kind of jiggling or fiddling. This is preening. You want to avoid all that, because it sort of suggests you're kind of wanting to get away or get out. Some people would consider it displacement activity. I should also mention steepling. This is where people do this. Very wise. Unfortunately, the steeple is making sure you keep looking at the eyes and you maintain eye contact. So even a modified steeple, and there's a barrier there, please avoid that. And also, don't point. Who remembers this incredible recruitment campaign? And there's Kitchener, I think it's Kitchener anyway, doing a big point to get people to sign up because your country needs you. So pointing, bit aggressive, bit too assertive for our liking in this. So just some thoughts there about things to avoid. And standing up is very similar to when you're seating, but again, think about whether you're going to be a wallflower scrunched up at the side of the room, clinging onto the wall, or whether you're in an open space with your arms being quite expansive. There's quite a lot of information around, how you should stand, again, taking up as much space as possible. And there was a lot of press comment recently when certain politicians were standing with their legs really astride, taking that to a real extreme. They just looked a bit silly rather than powerful, but hey. So, the physical space around us is also important. In different cultures, we have different allowances for what we might consider intimate and personal and business distances where we feel comfortable. And when we're in situations where people invade our body space, we will feel a bit threatened, and we'll register on a subconscious level. So that makes it really fun when you're networking in a very international environment. Anyway, I have to stop now because we're running out of time, but thank you very much indeed for watching and listening, hopefully noticing all my non-verbal communication through the session. Thanks very much, and hope to speak to you soon.